The other night, I attended a dance that united the membership of two clubs. The groups were the Organization of Young Women Who Have No Fur Coats and the Society of Young Men with No Mechanical Aptitude. It did not appear to be a joyous occasion, yet many of the people there enjoyed themselves. They complained a great deal, and for them this was a pleasure. Music was supplied by two bands. One, the Polyphonics, three folk singers brought by the young women, and the other, Tone Deaf, a heavy metal group brought by the young men. Despite a surfeit of music, no one danced or even mingled, except with those of their own sex. I was alone at the gathering and took the opportunity to drift about and sample random conversations. The one person I would have known, Ralph Harris, a friend who invited me to attend as his guest, was unable to make it when his car broke down on the way there, and he was too intimidated by the payphone to try to use it, so he walked home. The conversations, while clearly absorbing to those involved, seemed boring and repetitive to me. The men talked mostly about how their lives were being taken over by machines. One of their principal targets was the computer. No hackers there. They felt it was most unfair that so many jobs today require a solid working knowledge of the desktop PC. Advancement and promotion are almost impossible without it, they agreed. It's job discrimination, pure and simple, but no one in Washington will lift a finger on it, said Taylor Winberg. The lobby is too strong against us. We've got no clout. We lost our clout when Archimedes invented the lever, said Josh Thomas, and everyone laughed. Ruefully, I thought. Dick Reynolds was inveighing against the use of instant replay in pro football games. It's ridiculous, he said. Pitiful. Contrary to the basic spirit of the game. Another great national institution ruined by technology. Ed Claiborne, a member known for his cooking wizardry, was decrying the increasing trend toward mechanization in the kitchen. Gadgets, 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 he said, shaking his head. The knife won't satisfy them. It works, but so what? They've got to have blenders and dicers and slicers and processors and microprocessors. All I need is a heat source, a pot, the ingredients, and a knife, and I'll fix you a meal you'll never forget. You tell 'em, Ed, a few of the members shouted. The young women were engaged in equally vehement discussions. They too found the world to be an exceedingly unfair place. Carla Edwards said, I was shopping the other day and I counted at least 50 elderly women, all with furs. And they had that look in their eyes, you know? I've got mine, dearie. Where's yours? It's humiliating, said Doris Rogers. I've been avoiding the upscale malls. I don't know if I can really blame them, Charlotte Arnold said. For the look, I mean. Oh, I have nothing against elderly women. I intend to be one myself, said Carla. But goodness gracious, here I was in blue jeans with this threadbare nylon windbreaker, for God's sakes. Really, said Doris. I'd like my fur now, said Carla, instead of waiting until it looks better than I do. Hear, hear, said several women. I know exactly what you mean, said Bev Delaney, and I think I speak for all of us when I say that this isn't merely a selfish instinct. I suppose I could live without a fur. Careful, Bev, said Doris. Or even a shawl or a wrap or some trim, said Bev. But the problem is when every single young woman has to go without. That's when you have to believe there's something more to it than chance. It's a deliberate pattern of discrimination. Amen, said several members. But, said Wilma Turner pointedly, there are a few young women you can find in fur. Yes, said Bev archly, and we know who they are. And we know what they've done to get them, Charlotte Arnold said. The slightly wicked tendency of this discussion drove me back to the men, but they too were nearly up in arms. I have a confession to make, Charlie Purcell said. I used to consider myself something of a handyman. Not exactly a Mr. Fix-It, but I kept my house in order, if you know what I mean. Not anymore. And you know why? It's because they're building things to break. It's all disposable, Taylor Winberg said. You can't even tune a car, Josh Thomas said, and then he grinned. Not that I ever could. It's a damn shame, said Charlie Purcell. We're completely at their mercy. At the scent of fear, I gravitated back to the women, but it was there, too. Doris Rogers was telling the others that she'd heard about another paint-throwing incident. "I'm so glad I don't live in New York," she said. "Those people have completely lost their minds." "Can you imagine a world without fur?" said Charlotte Arnold. "Let's change the subject," said Bev Delaney. I was all for that, but instead of current events, the latest movies, or even the weather, the women began to discuss how unfair it was that some members of their sex should be rewarded solely on the basis of looks and sexual appeal. "But that sums up perfectly the entire approach of our corrupt culture, or what passes for culture," said Missy Brockington. "The superficiality, the shallowness. I mean, really, when you look at it objectively, what can we expect?" "That's right," said Wilma. "It's the whole country." On the other side of the room, quite independently, the men had reached the exact same conclusion. "It's why we're headed straight down the tube," said Jim Herzog. "Self-reliance, which built this country, is a thing of the past. We depend on things we don't understand." "And we have no choice in the matter," said Ed Claiborne. "That's what burns me up." Back with the women, Sally Phillips was speaking about whether a fur was really all they had cracked it up to be. The others filtered away like smoke as she spoke, and Wilma Turner quietly informed me that Sally was the extreme leftist in the group, once having proposed that they invite an animal rights activist to address them. "Now really," said Wilma, "that's going too far. I'm open-minded. I try to be, but hey, the bottom line is, I want my fur. I'm not against fur. I'll admit to almost a bitterness about having to wait for it, and some jealousy when I see my fur on someone else. You know what I'm saying? But it would be absurd to do as she suggests. It would sabotage the entire purpose of our group." Meanwhile, over at the punch table, a few people had actually begun to mingle, young men and women, conversing about the ills of our nation and finding common ground on the short end of the stick, proving once again the old adage that misery loves company. One couple, Ed Claiborne and Bev Delaney, even ventured out onto the dance floor. Both bands were playing at that time, but this did not deter them. When their turn was over, Bev enthusiastically confessed to her friends that she found Ed attractive. Charlotte Arnold knew Ed, and she said that despite having 10 thumbs, he was an excellent cook and a successful cartoonist, and she raised an eyebrow when she said that, implying that he was well off financially, further implying that he would be able to provide Bev with a certain item she greatly desired, if circumstances indicated that such a gift were proper. The additional implication of that lifted brow was that if she received that item as a token of affection, she would instantly lose her membership in the club and be separated from the comforting circle of her close friends. This may seem like a lot of implication to load up on one raised eyebrow, but it was obvious even to me, a male, with no special designs on fur. Bev only laughed and said, "Well, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it." "Make sure you're driving, honey," said Doris Rogers, and everyone laughed. Sally Phillips said, "Then you do it?" And Bev laughed again and patted her cheek. "In a heartbeat, dear," she said, "in a New York minute." And all the other young women, a bit sadly I thought, laughed and nodded their heads in approval.